Hello everybody, welcome back. Let me just move the camera a little bit more to the middle. This doesn't look good, does it? Because we've got a silly figure in the background. Anyway, my name is Daniel Gormally. Welcome back to my channel, Hometown Chess Hero. And yeah, it's quite windy and blustery today. I don't know if anyone else was affected by Storm Amy. Let me know your stories about how you coped with Storm Amy. But today we're going to look at a game that I played. This game was 92. That was 33 years ago. So I would have been 16 at the time. Don't think I really had much of a FIDE rating then, although I'm listed as 2100. I think that is related to the... Back then we didn't use ECF grades, we used BCF ratings. So I think in 1992 I didn't... I hadn't played any FIDE rated games by then. I didn't play any junior chess, more or less. So, I was relatively experienced. But why did I play the Kent League for Charlton? So Charlton was part of Kent League. Charlton's quite close to Kent, actually. It's in... I'm sure it's actually technically in Kent. It's in Greater London. But, see, we were in the Kent League, so we were playing against teams like Dartford, Sidcup, Beckenham and Bromley, Lewisham, and I could have played for Lewisham because I did actually technically live in Lewisham, not in Charlton. And Lewisham used to meet at the Catford Cricket Club. That much I remember. Maidstone would meet at our leisure centre in Maidstone. Maidstone were probably the biggest rivals that Charlton had. And some of the players who played for Maidstone, like Neil MacDonald, ended up transferring, sometimes playing for Charlton. I think we had Chris Howe maybe play London League for us as well. Chris Howe was like a big Maidstone player, but now he's based in sort of Sussex. So anyway, so let's have a look at this game. John Cordner was kind enough to send me the game. And I think the first match he's playing for Dartford, and the second time we play, he's playing for Phoenix. But I think Phoenix, some of it's coming back to me now. It's all coming back to me now. Terrible song that is. Phoenix, I think, were actually like a breakaway club. Like they were basically just a reincarnation of Dartford. Maybe Dartford had problems with the fees or whatever, or the club collapsed. I don't really remember. So anyway, let's have a look at the game, see if I can remember anything about the game. So he said to me, he was kind enough to contact me online, and he said, surely you must have PGNs of your old games. I was like, nah. I never kept the score sheets, right? A lot of people do. I'm lazy that way. I don't even keep the score sheets now. I mean, a lot of the games I play you can find online anyway. People tend to upload the PGNs, but you should keep your own PGNs. That's good advice. So I played at King's Indian, and later in my career I went away from the King's Indian. But I remember around about that time I had this book. I like the King's Indian. I had this book by Ray Keane. It was Kasparov on the King's Indian. So I quite like that book. Just showing these games that Kasparov played. So Kasparov inspired me. I remember some games from Kasparov that inspired me around about that period. So, I played the King's Indian. I didn't really know that much theory on it, to be honest. Like, I don't know much theory on it now, or any opening for that matter, but I knew some. So he went d5. I mean, knight g2 is obviously another move. d5, the first thing that springs out is why not go knight d4, actually. That looks like more combative, because obviously if you take, that would be some kind of mistake. Well, I mean, you could move the knight, admittedly, which is probably not that bad for white, but if you took here knight e4, it's already a lost position for white, because you take with the queen over rook e8, pinning the queen, pinning and winning. And obviously this is just a material balance, which is not good for white at all. 2 pieces for a queen. It's not going to be enough. Don't forget that Alpha Zero says a queen's worth 9.5. So knight would be 2 knights. So it would only be 6.1. So that's a 3.4 disadvantage if you do that, if you go into that position. Although the computer evaluated much more than that, because probably much more because of the fact that long term you're not going to survive, right? So anyway, so that's not possible. So knight e4 was a move. I guess after knight e4, knight e2 is the most testing. Now you could take on e2 or you could go c5. But anyway, I went knight e7, which looks a little bit slow, but probably not terrible. Maybe c5's a move, I don't know. Knight e2, knight e7. So he goes for this very aggressive plan, g4, went f5. He goes bishop h6. I must admit, I'm not sure what I would have done if he just... Well, actually, one idea he could think about is going like here, but then knight g6. 1992, by the way. What happened in 1992? Let's think about 1992. It's probably all that Britpop explosion, right? John Major became Prime Minister and won the general election against Neil Kinnock. After Neil, the Sun printed that headline, didn't they? Can the last person to leave the UK please turn the lights off? After he had his triumphant rally, didn't he, Kinnock? Party Politics won the Grand National. I mean, that was also around about the same time. And it was a huge horse, actually. And I think it was like Welsh Train, or maybe not Welsh Train, but I remember it running in the Welsh Grand National. And that was one of my favourite horses, was Carville's Hill, which won the 1991 Grand National by 20 lengths. I think it beat horses like Aquilifer, Bonanza Boy, Party Politics. I think Aquilifer finished second, but I can't remember. But it was ridden by Peter Scudamore. It was trained by Martin Park. It had originally been trained in Ireland, and it had these back problems. They brought it over to Martin Park, and it was winning these races by a huge amount of distance. There were these kind of drug allegations about Martin Park. I think they did a documentary on him as well. So there maybe was some sort of theory that possibly these horses were doped up. That's why they were winning by these huge distances. But I do remember it being a great horse, and it was a great galloper. And then it went to the Cheltenham Gold Cup. And Jenny Pittman, because they had a horse in there called Garrison Savannah, they had a stalking horse against it called Golden Freeze. So anyway, so basically that horse ran up the same, ran basically tried to run with Carville's Hill, and that put Carville's Hill off, and it started making lots of big mistakes, and by the end of the race it was knackered, got pulled up I think, and Cool Ground ended up winning in a freeway go with the Fellow and Garrison Savannah. Cool Ground, that was ridden by Toby Maguire. Anyway, that's just off the top of my head, by the way. 902 was also a year where Denmark won the European Championships. They were surprised. I think they came in at the last minute, didn't they? Maybe some other team pulled out. And they were on holiday, and they all came in and then ended up winning. I think they beat Germany in the semis or something like that, or possibly in the final, I can't remember. They beat Germany at some point. And that was that famous match where we lost to Sweden, and then the Sun castigated Graham Taylor as a turnip. So Kelvin Mackenzie was possibly the editor at that point. Anyway, I'm going off on a massive tangent, as I love to do. Yeah, so F4 maybe now, right? Looks better for white. Although there is knight h4, but that's kind of like just castle. So that was maybe another way that white could have considered playing. Interesting. There's also that move, but then I'm just, you're giving me the e4 square, so. The problem with the King's Indian, it kind of puts slight high emphasis on you to play very accurately, because, you got a space disadvantage. That's why I kind of moved away from the King's Indian eventually. But this gives me this g6 square. So I think at this point I was probably feeling reasonably comfortable. I went queen h4. That's kind of a natural move he took. Yeah, because now I'm fairly comfortable. He does have knight b5. It's probably a move that I hadn't even really considered. Knowing me. That I would have maybe even considered that move, yeah. Just try to take the pawn. I can imagine that I went queen h4 without even considering the idea that he might go knight b5 at the end. Now I might think about it. like queen d8 and now maybe knight g3, or maybe even do like h4 looks better for white, right? But maybe, I don't know, not so clear, I guess. Could take on e4. Okay, so he played knight g3. I went knight c5, which again looks a little bit risky because he's going to allow moves like b4. In fact, that's another question. Why doesn't he just go b4, actually? Because I don't want to go back to d7 because that allows knight f5. So I have to go to a6 and then go a3. And that feels very comfortable. Also, knight b5 here is another counter move. Well, knight b5 doesn't threaten the board now. But a3, yeah, it's still a game because he's not necessarily threatening knight b5, knight c7. Now I've got the knight on a6. So probably this is not so clear. Could even go king h8. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, not so clear probably at this point. He went bishop d3. I went f4. Rook g4. Yeah. Queen f2. Queen f2. Wow. Yeah, so it was tactically quite sharp, right? Was this in the London League, maybe? Or I think this was in the Kent League, yeah. I tell you, literally can't remember any of this game. Do you ever have games like that where, even maybe games you played recently, where you just... There's some games, a lot of games even maybe 1990s I remember quite well. Stick in my mind. But this game I just can't remember at all, which is kind of shocking, right? Rook f1 feels like a candidate move here. Just because he's allowed me to take the pawn, why couldn't he just defend it? Feels okay, right? But you do drop f5 at the end, that's the problem. So I could take on, either take on d3 and take on f5 now, or take on d2 and take on d3, take on f5 feels better for black, right? We're not 100% clear, but yeah, so my tactical idea just to show that was obviously that if he takes, I go here. Fairly obvious. And then take here. And in fact, I'm totally winning them because I'm even picking up a rook as well. So we did this little dance, and he went here. Still doesn't feel that clear, right? Because rook h5 probably a good move. Because defending against this threat, where he goes rook g7, he's attacking h2. I think 992 I would have been 16, right? So I would have just left school, because I think I left school when I was 15. Remember, Silence of Lambs came out around about that period as well. 1991. The Bodyguard was released 1992. Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner. I will always love you. Will always love you. That's not very good. I think it was first done by Dolly Parton, right? And she plays a singer called Rachel. I can't remember. Is it Rachel Green? No, Rachel Green. I'm getting mixed up with Friends, but Rachel somebody in the film. And Kevin Costner plays. It wasn't a very good film. Actually, Dances with Wolves came out. I think something like 1990. That was a much better film. That was a really good film with Kevin Costner. That's when he became this big star. And he kind of had these flops like Waterworld later with. Who was in Waterworld? Maybe Gina Davis was in Waterworld. I can't remember. Or was it Rennie? I can't remember, to be honest. Rennie Russo. I think it was Gina Davis, but it was getting mixed up. Rennie, Gina Davis. The Fly was a great film. That came out in '86, right? That was with Gina Davis. Jeff Goldblum. By David Cronenberg. Also did Scanners, you know. There's that great scene where he's in the kind of... They're doing this sort of psychic fight and they're sort of like... Yeah, I mean... The Elephant Man, that's on the BBC at the moment. It's on iPlayer, you know. I'm not an elephant man. I'm a human being. Directed by David Lynch. Anthony Hopkins was in it. Anthony Hopkins, produced by Mel Brooks. And Sir John Gielgud was in it. Who else? Michael Elphick was in it. John Hurt, of course. Great John Hurt, who also was in Alien. It's an Alien Earth at the moment out on Disney. I don't think it's very good, though, to be honest. So has anyone seen that? If you see that, please drop me a line down below. Alien Earth. It's not a very good film. Sorry, not a very good series. I think it goes on too long, and there's too many sort of like, it just jumps around too much, I think. Like, and also, none of the human characters are any way likable whatsoever. They're horrible people. So there's no real kind of, nothing to cheer for or cheer against, really. The only people to cheer for are like the robots kind of thing. Anyway, carry on. Yeah, so this looks lost. So let's have a look with the engine. Let's see what the engine says, because we could check with an engine. We have to enable the engine. And then, right. Okay, so we have to create a study. Have we created a study? This is a study. Okay. But I don't want to disable the engine. I want to enable it. Okay, we'll go to the next game. We'll come back, and then we'll... Okay, refresh. Disable... Yeah, for some reason, I like to see what the lead chest... That's strange, actually. Anyway, if we look at the engine, at what point was he doing well? Because I said as well off D5, maybe 94 was better. Yeah, the engine agrees. Like 97, probably slightly inaccurate. And in fact, he could just go for the immediate attack on the King's side, John Cordner, who I think is about... Back then was probably about 180, but I guess now would probably be about 160, John Cordner. I can't remember the guy at all. Even though I probably spoke to him on several occasions. Like, people come up to me and talk to us and say, "Oh, hi, Daddy, how you going?" And then you're supposed to remember their name. Like, well, I don't remember their name at all, mate. You get embarrassed because you talk to them for about half an hour. Even people I've spoken to a lot of times, I just can't remember their names. It's embarrassing. Yeah, so you get something like this. In fact, C5, that's actually a space getting, because I think that's a move that a lot of players would struggle to find, because C5, you think you played on the side of the board where your opponent is strongest, where your opponent is trying to attack. Now, Tiviakov in this recent book said you don't play on the side of the board where your opponent is undertaking operations. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but yeah, that's probably overall good advice, right? Maybe it depends on the situation as well, but... You generally never play on the side. But at this point, black is not undertaking operations, right? I've not got any kind of attack on the queen side. So that's the nice thing about these positions, these same-ish positions, that white can actually gain space on the queen side without any real threat. You're not going to go C6 here, because white would just end up winning material. Like, would just take here and then, eventually be able to take on D6. So... Yeah, I think that's a... I mean, if you go here, there is some prospect of blocking the king side. But even so, even here, then white is better because of this stuff with HC5 later. So white is better on the queen side. That's quite an important point in the same-ish, I think. So I said here, maybe G5 was... It doesn't love this. It says I could get good counterplay with this. Let's say F4. B5, interesting. Yeah. Would I have been capable of finding out then? I don't know. I didn't find it now, did I? Probably not. I would have got A6, B5, but how else would I create a counterplay? If you go here, you go F4. Well, you don't go F4, apparently. So, I played the kings in here, but clearly I knew nothing about it. Like I say, didn't really study it well enough. That was a big flaw with my career. I should have done more study on openings. I should have done really intensive study on openings and really got to the nitty-gritty of these positions. Really built up my understanding. Then I could have been a very strong player rather than... Well, I was a very strong player, relatively speaking, but, I could have been a strong GM, essentially, I think. But as it was, my approach was a bit wishy-washy. So... Yeah, H4 again, nice move. So knight G3. So I mentioned knight B5. That actually was a top move, but it doesn't really think it's that great for white. So by this point, I'm probably doing okay. Yeah, I said b4 was probably the most obvious move. I think now I wouldn't have gone. I think that's the difference now. I don't think I would have gone knight c5 because I think I am a little bit more conscious of what mistakes I'm likely to make, and I would have been aware that knight c5 is just allowing b4, so I probably wouldn't have played knight c5. I probably would have taken and seen what had happened, and then drop the king back. So say you just take out the pawn. Probably not the best move. You could even just drop the king back, I think. Okay, say knight f6 is better, but yeah. Well, the idea of knight f6 is similar to king h8. Is I want to go queen f4 because I feel like if I exchange the queens, I'm very comfortable. Anyway, that didn't happen. Yeah, but I'm stopping the knight f5 is not going to win the exchange at least. Knight f5, queen f4, so it's probably okay. Although in that variation can win that c7 pawn. It's beautiful as equal. So later on I started getting a better position. So yeah, I think around about here I would have felt reasonably comfortable. Queen f2 is actually not a good move. It's like a flashy move. That's something I was guilty of even now. I like flashy moves. I like tactics. You know, but you got to play the thing about chess, you got to play the best moves. Queen h3 is a better move. I win queen f2 is a mistake. And you had a chance just to go bishop e4 and actually reduce my advantage, because after this was the problem, that he's got this b4 move. This was a problem earlier. And then he gets a lovely knight to e4, so you get a variation like this. Yeah, he's got enough activity here to hold. In fact, let's say I go here, he's even better, even though he's a pawn down. He doesn't go here because of here. But he goes here and puts king on e4 and I've got nothing. You know, I'd probably lose this position. So yeah, after that kind of maybe slipped away a bit from white. And even that was a mistake, because rook g8 was a much better move. Oh, you had h4 there. No, b4. Yeah, that's kind of obvious, right? I probably had loads of time and just played all this really quickly and arrogantly. I was probably really... That's the difference between me now and me then. Is that, like I say, I see these... I don't have any scar tissue back then, really. So, you know, I went knight c5 because I'm not worried about it, you know. But, like, now I would see that he's got this move like b4, you know. So it's an advantage and disadvantage being a younger player. You know, you don't have that scar tissue that you built up. You're essentially a crap player because you miss a lot. But you're also confident, you're cocky, you play quickly. You know, that's the problem that I have when I play juniors now. They got the same, you know, they've got issues like I had back then when inexperienced, often get bad positions because they're inexperienced. But they got the cockiness and confidence to make up for it, which I kind of lack now because I'm older and I've got all this build up of scar tissue. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. So apparently we can't do a I don't understand why we can't do a... Oh, we can do... No. This is already a study. I don't understand why we can't do... You know, somebody on the chat will probably let me know anyway. You disable computer analysis. Oh, hang on. Is there some way that I can do it in the study? Computer analysis. Everyone. So I haven't disabled it. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to see what the accuracy level was. So this next game, I'm white against John, and I managed to win quite quickly. Apparently, let's have a look at the game. Let's try and predict my moves. I don't know my moves. I'm just looking at this game now. I haven't seen it. This was played in 1995. So what happened in 1995? Well, 1996, of course, was that famous European Championships where we got to the semis. I remember I actually was playing some blitz chess at Charlton House. And Gary Clark came up, so watching the football in the bar downstairs, and they said, oh, you know, we're 4-0 up against Holland. We lost to Germany in the semis, in the Euros. We had Gaza scored that goal against Scotland and did the dentist chair celebrations. We had Teddy Sheringham, we had Darren Anderton. Of course, Gareth Southgate famously. David Seaman would have been the goalkeeper. Maybe it was a bit too early for Beckham, I think. Stephen Gerrard maybe was he in? I don't think he was in the team by the way. We had people like Paul Ince, David Batty possibly. 1992. Graham Lasso. Terry Venables was manager. He passed away recently. 1995. Can't remember much about 1995 specific. I do remember playing. That was possibly the first FIDE rated tournament I played. Was that year 1995? Well, I played a FIDE rated tournament in London. It was run by Chris Dunworth, and it was above the London Chess and Bridge Centre in Euston. And I did okay, and I ended up getting a sort of rating of like 2380, like a partial rating, right? And then I ended up playing the Hastings Summer Tournament later that year. I was possibly still unrated even at that point. Or maybe 1994 was the first time I played a FIDE. Anyway, I can't remember, but it was around about that period. It was like mid-90s. So 95, and then 96 was the first year I played the British Championships. And that was in Nottingham, and I played the Major Open. So that was like an important period for me chess-wise. And that was really my teenage years. I was spent, you know, a lot of time I would go to Charlton House and I would play on a Tuesday and Thursday. Often people wouldn't turn up. You know, people like there, like Peter Hannon, you had Sid Jacobs. I think he was involved with Kent Chess. Maybe he would turn up, I'm not sure. It was Tyrone Jeffries, Tony Stebbins, Alan Hanratt, Gary Clark. Yeah, Peter Hannon. Did I mention Peter Hannon? Norman Harris is a black guy. He used to be like a pizza delivery driver. He'd often turn up. There was another guy with a beard. I can't actually remember his name, but I don't know if he's even still with us. But he was playing. I mean, you're talking about 30 years ago, essentially. But yeah, well, I should have basically been doing my studies and doing my homework and getting a career. And instead, I wasted my years, you know, playing chess. And that continues to this day. Anyway, let's have a look at the game. Going down this depressing tangent. So if you remember anything about that period, let me know in the comments below. I'm interested to know what was your chess like at that period. Were you around? You might not be even alive at that period. You know what I mean? So a lot of people watching this video probably weren't even born then, right? Okay, so C5, D5. Oh, so I was a fan of four pawns attack. And Gary Clark used to basically recommend it to me because he was a fan of four pawns. But eventually I came to the conclusion that you were giving black too many counter-attacking chances and it wasn't necessarily a great opening. Although I still think it's got a lot of bite to it. And actually, playing these positions, I think gave me a good grounding in how to play against Benoni type setups. Because these kind of setups are similar to what you get in a Benoni, and the E5 break becomes very important. So I've got a good score against the Benoni. So I think that's down to possibly playing the four pawns attack. I played against Peter Heine Nielsen once in the Politiken Cup in Denmark, who later became Magnus Carlsen's trainer. We ended up drawing that game, but I think he was a lot better. So he goes B5. So another line that I remember analysing a lot around about this period was this move E5, which I came to the conclusion wasn't very good. I think they take, and then they go knight E4, and I really think you just get nothing. But the idea is basically that after they go here, you play this normal stuff with bishop G5. But after take, so the main moves in this position are rook E8, which I've had, and I think that was one of the reasons I gave it up. Actually, because around about this point, it was actually 1995. I played against this German guy in the first round of Hastings. Sorry, it's actually maybe 96, 97. It was a lot. The last Hastings was played on the pier. So they played on the pier in Hastings, right? Which, if anyone's been to Hastings, can get a bit grim, especially in weather like where it got at the moment. And obviously, you're talking about middle winter. It was freezing on there. It was freezing on the pier. I remember it being very cold, and actually every time he did badly, because I lost both games, it was actually a lot warmer because there were like the massive heat was at the end of the hall, and once you dropped down a few boards, you were near the heater. Every time you won a game, you get progressively colder because you move up the boards. So after I basically lost this German guy, and he kept falling asleep at the board. He played his rook e8, and he played all his theory, like where you go e5, and he seemed to know what he was doing. Maybe he was a correspondence player or something like that. And that was kind of a humiliating experience. And then next round I played against Richard Pert. I didn't really know at that point, but I lost to him quite quickly. Played a good game. I think I showed that game on my channel at one point. Played a nice attack against my Sicilian. I didn't really know him before that game, but we started chatting after the game, and then I got to know him. And but then after that, I won 5 games in a row, so including beating my first GM. There's a Russian GM called I think it started with an S, like Zolyakin. He lost on time in a better position, but part of a good defence, so he kind of forced him to, you know, he got very nervous, and he sat at the exchange. It was rook and he had queen, knight, and rook against queen and 2 rooks, and I was defending because his queen and knight were combining really, really well. But eventually lost on time because he got so nervous. So that was my 5th win in a row, and then I played Yannick Pelessier from Switzerland, and he played his knight d6 sack in the bayonet attack. Very nice game, which I just hadn't seen at all. Bayonet attack was very popular around about that point. I played it from the white side as well, because Kramnik was doing well with it. So that's kind of like 1990s for me. That was a big period. That was probably the most important decade in my chess, actually, because you know, it's a period where I went from being like a mediocre player, chess player, to a strong player, chess player. All through that decade, I got to, like, you know, probably strong IM strength, you know, by the end of 1990s. You know, and I was trying to get GM norms. From, you know, beginning of 1990, where I would have been 14, nobody had ever heard of me in a wider sense. So that was an important period for me, and I should have built on that, like I said. Anyway, I'm babbling. Yeah, the other move is Bishop G4, which is probably the safest way the black can play, and Knight BD7. I've had games against Marcus Harvey in this. He's somebody who occasionally plays 4 pawns attack. B5 is an interesting move. So the idea is, if you take with a bishop, black will go knight takes e4. And after knight takes e4, queen a5 is very good for black, because if knight c3, I can chop c's and take on b5. I'm already threatening rook e8. You can't castle. This position is a total disaster for white. King f2, here we go, knight d7, knight f6. Or knight d7, knight b6, attack d5. White has a position full of holes, lots of weak light squares. Pawn on d5 is weak, so that's not a good variation for white at all. Obviously, if you block with a bishop, I could just win back the piece. Well, you can take there, but I don't think this is good for white at all. Probably just queen b2 is quite reasonable for black. At least equal, probably better for black, I would say. So I went e5. So I must have known what I was doing, because now if somebody played b5 against me, I won't have a clue. You know, because all my theory on this opening is well out of date. So he took, and then I went bishop g5. He went there, and I castled, which actually makes sense because you got quick development now, and that's a typical idea that you give up the e5 pawn. He decided to take. I can imagine here I probably played a move like d6, which does look very tempting. I mean, d6 looks very natural with a threat of knight d5. Also, sometimes you can take on e5, and I would imagine I probably went d6 immediately, because if I take on e5 and go d6, he's got bishop d4 check. Whereas if I go d6 and he takes on f3, he goes bishop d4. He's got his problem with his rook on a8 at the end. So my guess is I went d6 here, but not necessarily. Also, I did actually take, right? So maybe now I went bishop e7 and then d6, or I went d6 immediately. So presumably, I either played d6 here or I went bishop e7. I did go d6. And now I'm threatening bishop f3. So black has a little bit of a problem now. So I went bishop d7. So the most natural move probably is something like knight d5 with also the threat of knight f6. Actually, I do have a vague, even though I didn't really remember the first game, I do have a vague recollection of this game. Very vague recollection. Maybe I went knight d5, knight f6, and that's why the game ended so quickly, because because there's checkmate on the, or maybe bishop f3. Yeah, I mean, well, you can certainly see how white could win this quickly from here, right? So I did go knight d5, and now, I mean, like knight f6 looks very scary for black, possibly a very quick win, because you're just going to take out a bishop, and then you're threatening queen c1, queen h6. So my guess is I went knight f6 here, and actually I'm starting to remember this game vaguely, you know. So that's good. At least I have some record. Yeah, this looks lost already because queen c1 is now a huge threat. So I can imagine my teammates watching this game at this point. We're looking a bit smug and quite happy about the whole thing. And, you know, here he comes again. The boy wonder, the boy genius, he's winning again. You know, how does he do it? Nobody does it better. Makes me feel sad for the... I was thinking today, who's a young... Because for some reason last night, some Jane Seymour, the actress, popped up in my dream. Now, Jane Seymour, of course, famous figure from English history, was an English queen called Jane Seymour, was married to Henry VIII. I think that was one that he didn't execute. I could be wrong about that. I think Jane Seymour got off the hook. But there's also Jane Seymour, the actress, who's famous for being in Dr. Queen Medicine Woman, and also famous for being a Bond girl in Live and Let Die with Roger Moore and Yaphet Kotto. We talked about the Alien films earlier. There's like Alien, of course. Yaphet Kotto was in Alien. There's also Harry Dean Stanton, Sigourney Weaver, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Veronica Cartwright. I can't remember. It was a guy who played the alien. It was like, it starts with an A, but obviously he's not actually an actor. He's just sort of like in a suit, right? There's also there's the guy Tom Skerritt plays the captain, Dallas. So at the end of the film, in the special cut, in the director's cut, sorry, you see him. There's a scene where, if you haven't seen it, there's like a scene where he basically got captured by the alien. So in the film that was released at the cinemas, you didn't actually see what happened to him. You just see that he got caught by the alien and he ran into the alien. That was it. You don't know what happened, whether he got killed straight away. But later on, you see that him and the other character, who's played by Harry Dean Stanton, have been captured by the alien. And the Harry Dean Stanton one is almost completely absorbed by the alien, kind of into like the egg or whatever, and he's already gone. But the other one, the Dallas character is sort of like, kill me, you know. Anyway, so let's talk about Jane Seymour. So Jane Seymour, you can tell I'm much more interested in James Bond films than I am in Opening Theory. I used to love James. I used to do that every Saturday. I'd watch like a James Bond film on ITV, right? Like, you know, Live and Let Die or Spy Love Me, 1977. Yes, he was one of the youngest James. I think she played Solitaire, right? And she was one of the youngest James Bond girls. But actually, the youngest James Bond girl, I looked this up the other day. Earlier. It was someone called Goody. Was it Good? Not Jade Goody, but Goodall or something like that. And she was in the one, A View to a Kill, where it was with Christopher Walken and Grace Jones, and that was 1985. So Christopher Walken plays Max Soren. He's one of the baddies, like the bad who works for Christopher Walken or something like that, right? But he was also in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which I think came out around about 1989 with Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, directed by Spielberg, presumably. So Queen C1, Bishop F5. So how do you refute this variation? So Queen 8. So I definitely remember this game actually. So one way to potentially refute it is just to go Queen H6, Knight E6. That's his idea, and then go Rook takes F5. So, and after G takes F5, Bishop D3, and then you're threatening Bishop takes F5, and then Queen H7, and then John probably would have resigned. So I do actually remember this game. This first game I only very vaguely remember, but this game I do remember. Now he's sent it to me. It's very kind of John to send me this game. By the way, send me your games. You know, send me your game. It doesn't have to be against me. It can be against anyone. Any game that interests you, please send me your games. I'll leave a link down below. I'll leave my email down below if you want to send me your games. He actually resigned here. So the point is, after 96, you can go here, for example. It's probably not the only way to win, but it's the most efficient. And this looks winning, right? And then bishop takes f5. I don't see a good defence, because if you move the rook, bishop takes f5, you can't go knight f8 because queen g7. So it doesn't look like there's a defence for black. So that's totally winning. Yeah, it's actually forced mate. So what was the mistake? Okay, if we go back. So already I was doing very well actually at the opening. He should have actually gone queen b6. Yeah, that makes more sense. So queen a5 actually was the mistake. And this is actually not great either for black because of this attack on the enemy king. I mean, even to me like knight e4 it looks like it gives a lot of initiative, but like knight e4 feels no, it's not so great. But because knight e4, queen b6, knight f6 takes, knight d7 gives black counterplay, for example, or bishop g4. But you can go a4. Yeah, strangely enough, this is actually better for now. Knight e4. Ah, okay. So for some reason, not having a queen on b6 is quite important. Okay. Yeah, it's a tricky position. But yeah, if you don't, it's again what people possibly lack at a lower level is obviously John's a decent player, but you know, same with myself is, you know, intimate knowledge of opening theory is so important because queen a5 is actually turns out to be quite a big mistake. And I knew what I was doing here, so actually I would say that this game would probably be, you know, the computer would probably say this is a very accurate game. Firstly because it's a very short game. Okay, knight f6 is actually slight inaccuracy because he does have a way to defend against this. It's not obvious, but he could have gone rook e8. And the idea is if you go queen c1, why does that defend? So let's think about it. So rook e8 wants me to go bishop g4, dismantling the... it looks so natural to go knight f6. I mean, it's okay, it's still winning. But after rook e8, queen c1, you can't go rook e2 because of queen. Maybe the idea is rook e6 and just sack the exchange. So say for example queen. Let's say for example if you go queen rook e8, rook a e8, queen c1, rook e6 maybe. And then after queen a6, rook takes f6, rook takes f6. So as human play, you'd think, well, that's lost. Maybe, because, you know, huge d pawn, rook on f6 active. But the computer maybe just thinks, you know, move like rook e8, you got a counter-attack against the bishop. And if the bishop moves, you got rook e1 check. Or it might think move like knight d4 is playable. It will see resources. But for a human player, very easy to panic, right? And then he went knight d4 is actually a losing move, right? Because then queen c1 is just crushing. But if you go here, and I go here, yeah, I mean, you know, you would say like here is maybe not that. It's still better for white, I would imagine, but you know, you're still in the game, right? Yeah, and something like this might have happened, and then we would have still been battling. The other problem with these, so these that game was one-sided. Yeah, the first game, however, wasn't. So yeah, that's often the case. But I generally had a good score in these kind of leagues. I did lose games occasionally, of course, as you would expect. But generally, certainly later on, by the time 1990s, I would rack up big scores in these kind of leagues because, you know, I was IM level by sort of like mid-1990s probably. Mid to late 1990s. I mean, it became an IM in 1997. So understandably, I'd rack up big scores. But yeah, I mean, they're still good players. And I enjoyed the whole experience of competing in these leagues. But yeah, like I say again, you know, thanks to John for sending me these games, and you know, if anyone else has got any games they want to send me, please let me know, and more than happy to go through them. So anyway, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please like and subscribe. Please like the video because please comment, because that will help the video to get promoted on the algorithm. Thanks again.